again. I wanted to get another video down here on my relations series for this journey to and through Vietnam. And this topic is a little bit separate from my main interest in food and material culture that I talked about in that first video. But this is maybe the freshest one, just in terms of my most recent experiences. As I mentioned in the first video, why I'm in Vietnam right now. I'm in Hoi An, which is in the middle part of the country on the coast. And this is the second location that I've been in the central part of the country, after Da Nang. Da Nang is a city of about 8 million people. So it's a pretty major, I think of it as sort of like Miami a little bit in terms of the vibe, in terms of the kind of scale of things. There's a massive tourism industry in Da Nang, huge hotels and buses coming from all over the place, and incredible beach, but it's like hugely crowded and populated. And you don't see too many people who look like you when you look like me. Kind of like when random strangers who happen to look a little bit like you smile and nod just for no particular reason when you walk by each other. And they could be from Germany, they could be from Norway, they could be from the US, England. But I came down to Hoi An about a week ago, maybe not quite, but I've been here, and my thing is to explore as much as possible. And the focus of this particular video is on the experience of being the other when you're traveling in a faraway place. And you quickly realize that you stand out, right? And so I don't look like most people that I see when I'm walking around. And I wanted to just kind of sort of chew on the experience a little bit, sort of think it through, because I've noticed lots of really fascinating little nuances to this kind of outsider position that I find myself in. You know, when I travel, this has been the case now for many years. The more interested that I've become in food and food culture, when I travel, all I really want to do is that's what I want to experience. I want to get as close as possible to the lived, daily, authentic, sort of non-mediated to the outside world kind of practices and experiences of life in the place that I'm visiting, whether that's, in Europe, in Italy, France, Spain was the last time we were here, or traveling abroad, or in Asia. I've been to China. I've been, kind of all over the Southeast Asian area, and I really just want to, like, okay, what do you value in your everyday life? What is important to you? What do you love? That's what I want to experience, and I want to experience it in as unrepackaged a fashion as possible. It just feels more exciting, frankly. I have people who ask me constantly, like, do you like Vietnamese food? Do you like to eat Vietnamese food? And it's like, that's the whole reason I'm here. And it really boggles my mind to think that you would spend the money and the time to come all this way from wherever you started from, and then spend your time eating the same food that you eat back home. Like, what's the point, So when I was desperately ill with COVID, there was like a couple of times that I dragged my ailing carcass to the nearest, I hate to say it, McDonald's. There was one just around the corner from my apartment, and I did end up eating McDonald's, like a chicken sandwich, a couple of times, only because it's the only thing my system seemed to like not recoil at. And it was super close. It was the most convenient thing that I could do. And so I confess that I did do that. But aside from that desperate moment, I haven't had any interest in eating like pizza or pasta or going out for Italian food or American food. Like, no. Show me what you got, So the point I'm making here is when I travel, I try to make my Western self as invisible as possible. I try to camouflage. I try to blend in. I really want to kind of just be a set of eyes and a brain, and I just want to just like sponge up as much information as I can, and as much experience as I can in terms of like the kind of actual lived realities of the place that I'm encountering. And so what I do is I also like to walk. It's a great way to get some physical activity, and I also really enjoy experiencing a place and the rhythm of walking, which is really tough in Vietnam. I might do a separate video on the motorcycle culture here, which is one of the most glaring signatures of any time you would spend, especially in the bigger cities, but pretty much everywhere. There's actually proportionally very few cars in Vietnam, and there are a seemingly infinite number of motorbikes, and they're all over the place. They're up on the sidewalks, they're flying through the middle of buildings. It is really something to experience, and the noise, the beep 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 beep, right? So that is the kind of the norm here. And sure enough, I have rented a bike. I rented a bike in Da Nang because it's a very spread out area. But when I was in Saigon, I really just wanted to walk around. And that's what I did, even though it was really hot and humid, and even though the sidewalks are not made for walking because they're all broken up from the bikes and everything's uneven and it's very loud and dirty. Didn't matter. I still want to be walking. And so I stand out a little bit in that way. And so the experience of walking around the streets of Vietnam has been really quite fascinating. So I just wanted to kind of reflect on what it means to be the other, to be the kind of the outsider, to be the abnormal looking, out of step with the flow of things creature. Because that's me. And I, as much as I would prefer to not be such a standout kind of visible entity, it's unavoidable. Okay. And so over the past month, I have walked many, many miles. I got myself a really great pair of hiking shoes before I came out here, and I've pretty much almost destroyed them at this point because it's really important for me to just see everything on foot so that I can, scoot down an alley over here or just hop this or go there and go at my own pace and just sort of, that's how I kind of read the environment. And I just get out in the morning, I go to a coffee shop, and then I spend as much time as I can each day on foot exploring. And I've noticed some things. When you look the way I look, and when you walk around certain parts of the cities in Vietnam, there's sort of two signifiers, I think, that pop in the minds of the local folks here. And one is that you become an object of fascination and curiosity and bemusement, and maybe even a little bit of like nervousness. I don't know, but I have noticed that I have noticed myself being noticed at a level that I don't love, frankly. Like I said, I'd like to just sort of blend in and be invisible if possible. And yet, as I walk down the streets and the alleyways, I don't see people who look like me because I don't try to go to the comfortable kind of American-friendly places, the touristy places. I try to get away from those, and I try to go out into the neighborhoods and the just daily life kind of spaces in the cities that I traverse, and the looks. And so what I'm really interested in this video is the meanings of the looks that I've received when I'm here, and the kind of the forms of engagement that I've experienced. So the first signifier is object of fascination. The other signifier is source of revenue, right? If you're someone who looks like me, chances are you're a tourist, which I am. Chances are your dollar exchange rate is favorable in the sense that you are more comfortable paying for things that might cost more for the local folks, right? And there's a gap between your initial expectation of what things cost and what the local folks here expect to pay for certain things. And I have found that there's a lot of savvy folks especially in the bigger cities in Saigon and Da Nang, and certain in the dense touristy places here in Hoi An as well. There's savvy folks who realize that the ignorance of many of the people who show up here with their cameras and their innocence is that they can be exploited And sure enough, when I first got here and I think back to some of the money that I was spending for some of the services I was receiving, I cringe. But things are really cheap in Vietnam. You know, like you can spend $5 and eat a lunch uh, that would cost you $35 back home, kind of thing. Taxis cost a couple of bucks, whereas I remember my wife and I went to Chicago about a month before I left for Vietnam, and we landed in O'Hare, and we took a Lyft ride to our Airbnb, and I paid $65 just for one trip from the airport, and it killed me. But this is like, you know, costs are going up so much. But $65, whereas here, you know, a ride of similar distance and time would cost you less than 10. So things are really cheap for the American wallet, and there's many folks here who get that and know that and have been able to kind of play that space between what you expect when you land in terms of your where you come from and versus what things actually cost. The longer you're here, the more sensitive you get to those differences, and the more you kind of focus on what things ought to cost. And you, even though you have the ability to pay more, it's not right to be charged more for things that are at this level, right? So, two signifiers, one as object of fascination, one as source of potential revenue. And as I'm walking through the streets, it's look after look after look after look. And you could characterize the kind of the reactions and the responses in a range of ways, right? Like I said, many people look at you with like, holy cow, what are you doing here? Walking through an alleyway right next to where you're living, you're sitting on the ground in your apartment or your home, and here walks by this big white guy. And a lot of people just do that kind of like, what? And that could be followed up with a like a sneer, or like, what are you doing here? Are you lost? Go away. That's more rare than the usual, like, sort of a like, oh, cool, like, wow, who, what are you doing here? And so to become the object of fascination slash curiosity slash maybe a little bit concern, but to be honest, I don't get that too much. It's mostly just straight up like, whoa, what are you doing here? And that's amusing, right? And I got to say, the younger the looker, the more of an expression you get. So the kids in particular, the young folks, the little 5-year old, under 10 years old, they might not have even seen someone who looks like me in many cases, or very rarely. Especially, like I said, if I'm in Saigon, I'm out in the districts, not just District 1, but 4, 7, 3, whatever. I'm in Chinatown. I'm pushing out as far as I can go, and they don't see a lot of people who look like me. And so the kids in particular are just like, and they just giggle, and they wave at you, and they like to say hello, and you know, that's a source of like great excitement and amusement, and I will say hello back, and it's fun and it's cute, and it's part of this international relation, intercultural relation stuff that I'm interested in. To be honest, that even gets a little tiresome when you're walking miles and miles and miles every day, and literally almost every single person you see looks at you in a certain way, right? Whether it's amusement, fascination, humor, friendliness, there's always some kind of a reaction. And most of the time, I'm totally fine with it. But I have now been here for over a month, and I've been through this kind of like interactive moment like thousands of times at this point. And I got to say, I'm starting to get a little bit kind of encrusted to the whole experience. So yesterday, I found myself doing something that I would previously probably have considered to be kind of rude. But the next context, the signifier context, is a source of potential revenue, right? Now, in Hoi An, if you know anything about Hoi An, you know that there's this older town, and it's really, really cool. It's down by this river, and it's all these old buildings, and they've really done a great job of like putting in these cafes and restaurants and art galleries and little shops, and there's lots of like linen and silk and textiles and pottery, and it's really cool to walk around there. And consequently, it's become a really compressed and intensified space of commercial activity, right? And so as you're walking through there, the predominant engagement that I get from any person who's, who lives here and who's selling something is, hello, where are you from? They just immediately, hello, where are you from? And that is then followed up with, do you want? Would you like? Come in and check out. Come see, right? Do you want a ride? Do you want a jacket? Do you want a hat? Do you want sunglasses? Do you want a coffee? Do you want, okay? And I get it. Everyone's trying to make a living, right? But it's extremely intense and it's extremely like recurrent. And so I finally found myself yesterday putting these into my ears just so that I could have a kind of plausible, visible reason to just ignore everyone. Because you start out, and when people are engaging you and they're saying, hello, where are you from? Your first reaction is, oh, they want to get to know me, so let me stop and talk to them. And then you quickly realize that that is now followed up with, come into the shop, would you like, right? And so you get adjusted to the different forms of engagement here. And I have come to realize that a hello is like throwing your fishing line in the water, and it's a way to hook you. Even more subtle than that, if you're walking by on the streets in Hoi An and you look into, they have these really lovely suit manufacturer shops, like suits and dresses and coats and so on. And the vendors will be sitting in there just watching people walk by. And if you even look into the space and they see you looking, eye contact is fish on the line, right? They've snagged a fish. So they immediately follow it up with, hello, where are you from? And that's when you like got the push on the line and you pull back to try to like get them in, right? And then if you respond, now they're going to start reeling, right? Now they're going to start working you and getting you into the shop, and they're going to start giving you the hard sell. The Vietnamese are very aggressive, free market citizens. They will tirelessly go after you. And there's a respect there, but I feel like it's a game and they're playing their part. And my part is to dodge and to evade and to, let it kind of wash past you. But it is difficult and it gets a little bit obnoxious after a while when literally walking down the street, hello, where are you from? Hello, where are you from? Hello, where are you from? And at a certain point, you just say, I'm not going to engage at all. So I'm fascinated by the different forms of engagement and what it means to actually look at something. To make eye contact with someone forms a subtle contract, a momentary brief contract that you're interested, and therefore they can start to try to reel you in. So I have now become conditioned to walk down the street with essentially a blinders on. I don't look. I can't engage. Even if I see out of the corner of my eye, there's some, oh, that's an interesting look. I can't look in there unless I'm actually ready to get serious and to begin the negotiation process. I'm not here to shop. I'm here to learn. I'm here to experience and observe. And so this has been a fascinating education on the kind of the ways that you are engaged as other in that split way of fascination or source of revenue, and how calloused you become. And there are times where I become quite frustrated. Like if you go into one of these central markets where there's all kinds of things, there's the big one in Saigon. I went in there and within about 2 minutes, I literally was swarmed by people like thrusting menus in my face and here's coffee beans and here's spices and here, try this thing, here, try this thing. Literally arms coming at me from all directions. And I finally just was like, I'm out of here, go away. Like it can be that oppressive, that obnoxious at times. And so this is now my new trick, is to try to kind of filter out some of that stuff. And I have a now legitimate excuse to just sort of say, sorry, I can't hear you, or I don't even look, I don't even engage. So I hear people saying, hello, 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 hello. They holler at you from across the street. Hello, where are you from? Hello, sir, do you want to see? So it's got me thinking about, I'm going to wrap this up in the next few minutes here, but it's got me thinking about this concept that I teach about, this notion of interpolation. There's a couple of important essays that I teach in my classes. One is by Maurice Charlon on constitutive rhetoric. And another one is by Michael Warner on publics and counterpublics. And there's a line in Michael Warner's essay where he says, the direction of your glance can constitute your social world. And I think about that line a lot, right? That word constitute is really important. So Marie Charlons has written this great essay on constitutive rhetoric and what it means to encounter discourse and to become a subject of that discourse. And in the Charlon essay, he talks about interpolation through this notion of being hailed, Hail. And he uses an example of a policeman calling out to you on the street, like, hey, you, right? And if you see yourself as the subject or the audience of that message, now you are interpolated, you're folded into that discourse, and now you are the subject of that discourse. Walking around the streets and being hailed constantly, hey, they literally say, hey, hey, hey. They're trying to get your attention. They're trying to get you folded into their shop, their world, their experience. And so it's got me thinking about some of the subtleties and the nuances of this question of interpolation, right? Because one of the things that Charlon does not really get into is the different ways that a subject can react to a hail. And I find myself going through all these little subtle maneuvers to try to avoid the hail, the hey you, the hey sir, hey, come, come in, come see, come look. And so it's forced me into a position of thinking about my kind of agency as someone who wants to be passive and invisible, right? And yet I still have agency represented to these people who have shops and restaurants and cafes. Everyone wants a little piece of your action. And so I've been kind of pushed into this place of having to negotiate constantly the ways of being hailed, right? And so at first it was smile and politely say no thank you. That was after like actually talking and engaging and quickly realizing that there is no innocent hey, there is no innocent hello, right? There's strings attached when you look over and someone says hello. You might not wish it were that way. You might wish that it was just a genuine kind of hello. And sure enough, there are, like, especially when you're away from the markets and so on, you're just walking in the neighborhoods, a lot of times people will just smile and say hello, and it's awesome and it's fun and it's exciting. And everyone's so friendly. But when you're in the kind of the commercial space, a hey or a hello or a where you from means I'm trying to get you on the line. So it forces you into that realization that you now need to negotiate your relationship to the discourse around you. And it does sort of push you in a position of, okay, I can't just politely say hello back because now I'm folded in, right? And then it even became, after that, it was no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, I'm fine, not interested, no, they keep coming at you. And now it's literally, I don't even want to engage, right? And so now I'm trying to make myself invisible through these things and through just like put my head down and trying to get where I'm going. But it's interesting because it requires you to not scan your horizon because you're aware of your peripheries and the fact that there's like all these hailing efforts surrounding you everywhere you go. Now, this is an intensified space in the old town in Hoi An, but it's a really fascinating kind of experience of being the other, trying to be invisible, very not being invisible, and having to negotiate the constant attempts to fold you into a shop, to a commercial exchange, so on and so on and so on. So it's got me thinking a lot about discourse, got me thinking a lot about appeals, engagements, the fact that Warner says your glance can constitute your social world. It got me thinking the other day about not just glance, more like focus, where you actually allow your attention to focus. Because even your non-glance is important, right? Like I can see someone calling me over there, but I dare not glance over there because I know what that focus will lead to. So you have to kind of redirect your glance. And even the redirected or the non-glance can itself become meaningful in that way. And so the different forms, the different agencies of passivity, I think are really interesting in the ways that you have to kind of negotiate your environment.